As a real estate investor and a real estate professional, I get asked almost every day, do you know a good attorney? And that question on one hand is the kind I want to get because I want to be a resource to my clients, prospects, team members. But at the same time, that question can lead to a lot of problems and complications if the answer isn't the right answer. One of the right answers that I've learned along the way as a real estate investor here in Southern California at various events, very active in the real estate investor events I go to, is Jack LaPedis. And the testament of how good he is as an attorney is that I am friends with him despite the fact that he goes to UCLA home football games. So Jack LaPedis, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So you're one of the few attorneys that kind of likes to field the question, I need an attorney or I need a real estate attorney, because I know as a professional, the odds of picking the right one are wrong without getting a lot more information. So when somebody, as a real estate agent, calls you and says, hey, I need a real estate attorney, what's the right questions they should ask to find the right attorney to help them with a client in that circumstance?
Well, I think it's important to know the destination before you start laying track. And I know a lot of people will say, oh, well, I need a real estate attorney to file this kind of lawsuit. And that is starting to lay track before you know the destination. And so the question I always ask, and the questions that real estate professionals should ask their clients who are looking for a lawyer is, what is it you want them to do? Not file a lawsuit or write a letter. What is the end result that you're looking for? And that will help you because, real estate attorneys, when you say real estate attorneys, well, first of all, most people think of landlord-tenant first, and I don't do landlord-tenant. But there's a lot of different areas of real estate law. And so, if someone says, for example, oh, I'm having a problem with the city and an easement that the city says they have, I don't deal with governmental agencies. That's just not something that's in my practice. I know an attorney who that's almost all they do. And they're also a real estate attorney. So you kind of have to get out of this mindset of, here's what I want a lawyer to do. Here's what I want my attorney to do with what do I want the end result to be? And then that will point you to the right lawyer. And when you're talking to a lawyer and you get on the phone and you say, I want to move my property line. Then you can start having a conversation about what the end result, how to get to the end result. What's the right way to get there?
And to your point, even in the landlord-tenant issue, my experience is there's attorneys who handle only landlords, and there's other attorneys who handle only tenants. And the ones that are any good generally don't cross those lines for a variety of reasons, both business-related and legal ethical related. And so it's really important to really narrow down, what I think, as you say, what the result you're looking for is to get the right attorney. Outside of California, when somebody says a real estate attorney, most commonly they want what we would call in California an escrow officer, which is really kind of like an attorney with a subset of attorneys' rights and powers and delegated authority to handle a limited transaction. And that's what we do in California, as opposed to using attorneys in other states. The person who does that work is almost always a member of the bar and referred to as a real estate attorney. So here you're talking about somebody who's more complex. Just real quick.
Also, in other states, for any real estate transaction, you have to have a lawyer involved. It can't just be a couple real estate agents and a broker, there actually has to be a real estate lawyer. I don't know the details of it, but I know that sometimes I'll get contacted by someone who's moved here from a different state saying, hey, I want to buy a house, but I need to hire a lawyer. I'm like, no, you don't.
Right. Well, and I will say, I think one reason why you don't in California is we have such good forms that were prepared in consultation with many attorneys, teams of attorneys, that as long as we follow those dots, it covers so many of the issues that an attorney would have to cover. And I know in commercial deals where attorneys have to write out customized contracts, a lot of things they're doing are the same things in our standard forms. They're just customizing it for whatever reason. Hey, just some real quick housekeeping. This is the official podcast of the LA County Real Estate Investors Association, Lloyd Siegel's program. We meet live every second Thursday of the month in the Palms area on Motor Avenue at the Iman Center. We usually get about 200 people as students. We have a great speaker. We call that the Vendors Expo, and there'll be vendors like me. I'm one of maybe 50 vendors, and there'll be a speaker. February 8th is going to be two young guys who are going to talk about short-term rentals. But every month there's a different topic of real estate investing from a different expert. At the same time, there's 50 vendors there, and the event's free. So if you're interested, you can go to lareic.com and get those details and sign up in advance, as well as the Real Estate Training Bootcamp if you want to join there. Our guest today is Jack LaPedis, who is a real estate attorney. He's experienced, loyal, and caring, and UCLA fan, which is, we're going to call that against him. You guys love his website at lapedaslaw.com if you want to get more information from him on that. So I know that you've been active in real estate investing circles because I met you there's a Wednesday program at Sizzler I've seen you at from time to time. I've seen you at at our event, the LA County Real Estate Investors Association event on the second Thursday of the month. So tell me about your particular interest in meeting investors in the field, so to speak, rather than just sitting behind the ivory tower of being an attorney.
Well, I spent a little bit of time in ivory towers. I worked at law firms for a little over 20 years, almost 21 years. And then I spent a good portion of that, about 11 years, doing almost exclusively real estate litigation. And after 21 years, I decided I was now an adult and I should open my own office. And open my own office literally with 0 clients and sort of a vague idea of the kind of cases I wanted to handle. I had done landlord-tenant litigation and didn't want to do that. I had handled governmental agency litigation and didn't want to do that. And I found what I really enjoyed, for the most part, had to do with single family residences, purchase and sale, neighbor disputes, things like that. And so that's what I started to focus on. And at these real estate investor groups, you really get a lot of those kinds of transactions going on, people buying and selling single family homes, either for themselves or to fix and flip or to buy and hold. And the kind of issues that I like to deal with come up a lot: property line issues, easements, disputes regarding the purchase and sale, things like that. Issues involving, I joke that in the West Side, when they were building property in the West Side, the property lines were merely suggestions for where the fences might want to go. And so there's, if I get a lot of transactions that end up in the West Side where someone bought a house, a fix and flipper, or even someone who's going to tear it down. One of the first things they do is they do a survey, and then they find out the fence is 5 feet in the wrong direction. So, I find that a lot of that, those types of transactions turn into business for me. But, I've also been accused of giving away a lot of free advice, which is worth every penny you pay for it, and for turning away clients because, again, as we talked about earlier, people come to me and say, "Oh, I want to sue this person," and we talk about, well, why do you want to sue them? And it turns out there's really nothing, no there there. So I find that these meetings are a really great place to find people who I can help.
Well, there's a lot to unpack. Let me try to break this down a little bit. So one of the things I find about you that I appreciate is you have been a tremendous resource for me when I mistakenly came to you not knowing the right answer, and you refer me to the attorney that was the right answer, right? You don't do A, but so-and-so does do A, and you refer me to them, and they turned out to be a great resource. So obviously, you're not just sending business to anybody. You know who works or not. Talk a little bit about the skill of referring to maybe the best in practice or the best that you're aware of, what you do that helps you stay on top of who to send business to. Because you have a pretty wide Rolodex or wide list of attorneys in various specializations, at least in my experience.
Yeah, so I'm in a lawyers networking group. It's just lawyers, and we There's various chapters that meet at various times, and I try to attend as many as I can. And certainly during COVID, when it was all online, it was very easy to attend the Westlake meeting in the morning and the Pasadena meeting in the afternoon because there wasn't any travel. And so I got to know a lot of lawyers, and some of which I knew beforehand, but now I know better, and others I got introduced to. And there's an email that goes out every day from that group where attorneys thank other attorneys for their assistance. And, you're able to see who's getting a lot of thanks and who's giving a lot of thanks. And so networking and referrals is, who like and trust. And it really, and know and like it really leads to a lot of trust. And so there's a lot of these attorneys who I know and I like. There are attorneys in this networking group who, for lack of a better way, are dead to me because I know them, but I don't like them at all and I don't trust them at all. And so I don't refer to them. And that's life. That's reality. There are other attorneys who someone comes to me and says, I have a case about XYZ. I'm like, oh yeah, I know exactly who to send you to. I still tend to give at least 2 names, sometimes 3, because that's just good business when you're referring people out. But I'm not throwing darts against the wall and say, okay, this is who I'm going to refer to. If I refer you to someone, it's because I know them, and if you drop my name, they'll still treat you well. But they'll know where it's coming from, and they generally will know, like, and trust me. So if I've spoken to the person and I've referred it, they know that there's something there. I generally will not, if I get a call and I'm talking to the person and I'm like, this is shady, or this is a terrible case, or for whatever reason, I may tell them, sorry, I can't help you, and leave it at that. And that occurs sometimes too, because part of the trust part is you have to trust your referral partners not to send you crappy cases.
Right. Yeah, I've been lucky. I mean, you've really introduced me to some really good practitioners in some of the specialties and in my clients, and we've had really good outcomes. And so I think so often I see in realtor posts, and I have one, Probate Weekly, which my focus is on probate. And I feel like within the confines, I have a good network. Outside of that, I don't really know one attorney from another so much. And I'll see somebody say, who knows an attorney in Chattanooga, Tennessee? And there's like 15 people with answers, and like, but you even know what he's looking for. How would you, it's one thing if they say I need a estate planning attorney or I need a litigation attorney, but I think real estate agents in particular are too quick to send business to their friend, which isn't necessarily a service to them. So I appreciate that you do that. One of the things that I know is part of your business is, and it relates to us as realtors as well, we tend to think of attorneys as strictly, almost judicial, in that everything is by the book, everything is by the law, everything is without emotion. But the reality is, in some of these conflicts you deal with, like property lines, that 5-foot difference where the fence is, in my experience, gets very emotional, right? The one neighbor who was cheated out of 5 feet, it can be intense emotions. How do you deal with that? How do you keep that in check for yourself? How do you keep that, and how do you get your customer or client to keep that in check as well, to, obviously to lead to the best outcome?
Well, I think that, everything in our past kind of leads us to where we are today. The butterfly effect and that sort of thing. When I was growing up, I lived in the Bay Area, and we had houses that were right next to each other, a little alleyway in between. And we had a house on one side of us that had a family, a mother, a father, and 3 children. And their youngest was older than my oldest sibling. So that I think he was 6 or 7 years older than me. The father, unfortunately, was a alcoholic contractor. And he would come home from work in his pickup truck, and he would be drunk. And if my dad was outside in front of our house, he would go over and threaten his life, which he did a number of times in front of me. The mother was also, unfortunately, an alcoholic. And what she liked to do was take their dog's business and throw it over the fence into our backyard. And their 2 older kids were gone by the time I was a little older. But the younger one, their son, what he liked to do was come over. If I was out front playing with my friends, he would spray us with water. So I grew up with a neighbor dispute, and I know those feelings, and I know what that's like. And I know I know that feeling of turning the corner and going, oh, I hope they're not home, or I hope they're inside and passed out, so I don't have to deal with them today. So I have some understanding when I take on a neighbor dispute, that feeling of there's someone making my life miserable in my own home. I also have a little background in psychology. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, and I was involved in a research project and all this kind of stuff. So I use some of that as well. So I know it's not just the papers and the law. No, there's emotion. And my job is to understand that emotion and not feed into it, and to some extent act a little bit like a therapist. I have this one case in particular that I was just working on this morning, where the clients are going nuts because the neighbor keeps lying about things in papers that they're filing with the court, and the lawyer saying things to me that the client lied about. And I'm like, I tell the client, I go, I know that sucks, but I love it. It's great that they're lying. It's good for us that they're lying, because in the end, we're going to be able to use that against them. But they're like, oh, she's lying. We need to tell the judge that she's lying. It's like, well, now's not the time to do that.
Right.
And so, I think a lot of it is remembering, these are people and it's their home, and it's a very important job that I have. And I have to keep that in mind all the time, that, it's a really personal thing. There's nothing more personal than your home to some extent.
Right.
And so I always try and keep that in mind and keep the clients up to date. One of the things that I do that I don't know of any other lawyer that does, and I'm not saying that to toot my own horn, I'm just like, this crazy thing I came up with is my clients are BCC'd on almost every email I send. They know exactly what's going on in real time. And so if I email opposing counsel, or if I email an expert, or if I email the court, which doesn't happen often, the client sees that right away. And so I don't have to, bring the client up to date, and the client doesn't have to worry or wonder what's going on with the case. And so that's a really important thing, I think, is to keep the clients up to date, and that helps keep their anxiety level down. One of the things I also did earlier in my career is I represented other attorneys who were sued for malpractice. Oh. And the biggest thing you get sued for is lack of communication.
100%.
So that's something I recommend also that real estate agents do is BCC your clients or CC your clients on every communication, so they know exactly what's going on in real time. And if you are hesitant to send an email to your client, then maybe you need to rethink that email.
Yep. That's a good point. You're 100% right. I know I say this all the time. 9% of clients, when they hire their probate administration attorney, love them. And after 90 days, they hate them. And the 9% of the reason why, 9% of the time, is lack of communication in between. And it's just as simple as routine emails copying your customer so they see you're doing something. You and I as professionals might not think of it as all that much, but to customers, it's magic that we do certain things that they could never do. They could never file the document. They can never write that email to the other party. And that's why they hire us in some degree. And I think you're so right. BCCing your customer is so powerful that it just, you have to make the phone call. And if you do 4 or 5 of those emails, you avoid 2 or 3 intense phone calls. But the complaint I get from clients all the time about the attorney is just lack of communication, not how they communicate, not that the case is going badly. They just don't hear from them, and our minds assume the worst in the meantime. So that's great advice.
There's 2 things that come up when you talk. First of all, I jokingly but realistically say, like, I have a superpower. There's something I can do that large part of the world can't do, and that's be a lawyer and do things that lawyers do. Yeah. And so that's I like to use that superpower for good most of the time. Mm-hmm. And then it's I think also a lot of lawyers forget that they were hired by the client, and the client is the boss. The lawyer is a tool for the client to do things. And so I can make recommendations. I can make suggestions. I can make their wishes happen for the most part. But in the end, it's the client who has to make the decision. I've had clients say, well, whatever you think, Jack. And I go, no, that's not the way it works. I need you to tell me what it is you want. And I will, in a given situation, I will typically give 3 recommendations or suggestions. One is the one I recommend. The second one is the one that we could also do that I'm not as thrilled with. And usually the second one's cheaper than the first one, as it turns out. And then there's a third one that I hesitate to give because it's usually borderline unethical. I mean, it's something you could do. And sometimes I say to them, but if you choose a third one, I'm probably not the right lawyer for you. But I'm duty bound to tell them what their options are. And if they want to go down that third road, then I say, well, then you need to get another lawyer possibly.
I heard once somebody tell me that my job as a professional is to educate my clients so they make the best decision. Right. And so this day I hesitate to make a decision for a client. I'll say, well, if you're asking me to decide for you, means I didn't do my job educating you, because you know way more than I do about your situation. You know your ability to handle things emotionally. You know your finances in more depth. You know what your future might hold, that I might not know. And if I've educated you, you'll make the right decision. But how could I possibly know all the things about you that I need to? And that's generally been the case. I tried to stay out of that. One thing she mentioned, just to go back and come and pack, is free advice. And I think this is a area that all business people have to kind of answer for themselves, the trade-off between giving value or giving information, and then perhaps giving too much or giving enough that people think they don't need this. So share with us kind of your strategy as a small business person yourself. You run a business, not as an attorney, but it's the same question we all have. How do you find the right balance between what you give for free, people calling in, consults and such, versus at what point you say, okay, if we do this, then I need to charge for it?
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of an art to it. I'm happy to talk with people. I don't look at my networking partners as potential clients. I look at my networking partners as my sales team. And so if someone who's involved in networking with me comes to me with a problem, either for themselves or for someone else, I'm happy to give general information and sort of help them, like we talked about much earlier, help them figure out, well, what are you really looking for? What do you hope the end result to be? Okay, where are you now? I say a lot to people, you're not in a position to hire a lawyer at this time. There's like 2 or 3 steps you should take before you start deciding to hire a lawyer. And here are generally those 2 or 3 steps. And I'm happy to have those conversations. I very rarely will have those kind of conversations more than once with the same person about the same issue. I used to, think that people who are talking to me will want to hire me. But after 2 or 3 conversations about the same thing, they're looking for free legal advice. And I don't think that's appropriate. But if someone comes to me with a singular conversation and, I make it very clear I'm not their lawyer and I'm not giving legal advice. And, I don't think you should make any serious acts based on what we're talking about. I'm just sort of giving you general information. The other thing that happens is a lot of it is just sort of, well, I'm not talking to you as a lawyer. I'm talking to you as a homeowner, or I'm talking to you as a small business owner. And that, just another, Joe on the street. And this is, based on my life experience as a homeowner, at about 25 years ago, I sued a neighbor because of a property line issue. And it had, it really had nothing to do with the type of law I was practicing at the time. So I have some experience as a litigator, in small claims court. So, that's the kind of information I try to pass on. And I think there are areas of law and certain types of attorneys where it just doesn't work. You can't have a cocktail conversation with someone about a legal issue and because it can get you into trouble. And I if someone emails me and I email them back, I have a special signature that I add to my emails that says, I'm not your lawyer, and here's what, just to make it clear and that sort of thing. And when I talk to them, I say, now I'm not your lawyer and I'm not giving you legal advice. This is just common sense or whatever. And, knock on wood, it hasn't gotten me into trouble yet, but I think it has. If it hasn't gotten me actual business, I think it's helped my reputation. I think people are pleasantly surprised when a lawyer will talk to them about these sorts of things and help steer them in the right direction. And every once in a while, now I can think one off the top of my head where someone came back around and ended up being a client.
I do think that the thing that strikes me about you and I appreciate is your willingness to talk to people. I think that it's great to want, if you work for a big law firm, I guess, you could be one of those guys secluded in a room and they just hand the files all day and you just do your legal work and you go home at the end of the day. Most attorneys leave those practices because they want to be involved with human beings, with people. Most of us are going to talk to the people business at some point. And so I do appreciate that you are able to help people. And I think in the long run, it gives you better leads, gives you better business. At least I hope it does. At least I try to refer you, good business and try to weed away from you bad business. So then the next part that leads to, obviously, though, is, and you mentioned this when you started, to go back to that part of the conversation, that you don't do what you don't do, that you have a clear specialization. I still struggle with myself enunciating, but I'll call you with the peripheral stuff because you will refer it to the right party. But as a business person, you focus on this. I know as real estate agents, some of the events you and I've gone to, when realtors are introduced, they'll say, I do first-time home buyers, investors, homes, condos, townhomes, duplexes, multifamily, commercial, retail. And I'm like, well, what the hell do they do? You and I know attorneys who specialize in everything. You go to the website, they do everything. And I know for me, it concerns me that the client's not going to get good service because you want something done, you want to go to an expert. So tell me about your decision to narrow your focus. Obviously, you're giving away the opportunity for other business, yet you don't do that particularly well or regularly. It may not be productive for you. So talk to me about your strategy to focus in on the particular areas of real estate that you do focus in on and not to do the parts that you don't.
So like I said, I work at law firms, and I was one of those drones where, they throw the file in your desk and you had to represent the person and do your best job. And I did a wide variety of law, which actually helped set me up for today. And I did personal injury, both on the plaintiff and defense side. I did medical malpractice defense, legal malpractice defense, represented insurance brokers. I did construction defect. I did governmental agency work. I did landlord tenant, small business litigation, big business litigation. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few things. And you got to know yourself. And I know that if I'm working on a type of law that I don't enjoy, it's going to affect my work and my life. And whereas if I'm working in an area of law and the types of cases that I like, that will positively affect my work and my life. And so when I started my practice, like I said, I had 0 clients. I actually turned down my first 3 referrals because they were not the kind of law I wanted to handle. And as I progressed, that was almost 6.5 years ago, as my firm progressed and I have the kind of cases I want, I've narrowed it down even further than I did then. And there are some kinds of cases that you would think, if you talk to me and say, okay, what kind of case do you handle? Oh, well, that falls in, so you'll handle this kind of case. And I've come to find I don't like mudslide cases. There's just something about mudslide cases. The neighbor's house slid into the. I don't like those kind of cases. That's a neighbor dispute. So, but I don't handle that, and I turn those away. There are sometimes it's just a feeling. Like one of the things I say is I don't represent the bad guy. So if I'm interviewing someone and they're it seems to me like they're the one who's causing the problem or being unreasonable, or just basically the law is against them. They're not in the right. I won't take that case. And sometimes I find out in the middle of the case that they're not in the right, and try and, well, I try and steer the case to the law. I have a conversation with the client and say, okay, here's what the law says. You know, you're not right. So you can do one of two things. We can try and steer this towards a settlement that you can live with, or you can get another lawyer if you want to continue to fight this wrong. So, you know, I know I'm very lucky in the sense that there are lawyers out there who absolutely have to take every case that comes through the door where the check clears. And I'm thankful that I'm in a situation where I don't. I can turn down cases whenever I want. And so what I do is not for every lawyer, but I'm able to sleep at night. I'm able to look my kids in the eye and tell them what I do honestly. And that, I mean, that's, you know, that's the best thing I can do. And look, I'm not a workaholic. I'm not, you know, I don't work, you know, live to work. I work to live. I work, you know, because I need to make some money so I can go to the Bruin games and go to the Niner games and that sort of thing. And the other thing is, you know, another thing I think that is a little different about me than a lot of other attorneys is sometimes the best thing you can do for a client is nothing. You know, sometimes you don't want to poke the bear. And when you work at a big law firm, you have to bill. You can't bill for doing nothing.
Right.
Well, it's my firm. I decide what I want to do. And sometimes we'll just like do nothing for 6 months on a case. And it's the best thing for the client because it either makes the case go away or it puts us in a better position or whatever. And I don't think a lot of attorneys have that kind of thought process. Yep. You know, I jokingly say Jack LaPedis doing nothing for his clients since 2017. Sometimes it's true. You know, you have cases that will just sit around because I actually, one of the cases that really is heated up, the other side was just getting ridiculous. We were doing pre-litigation negotiations, and it came to the point where we're clearly not going to settle this. So what we decided to do was go radio silent. I said, look, either they're going to go away or they're going to sue you. And I don't think we're going to get anywhere communicating with them any further, and it costs you money every time I communicate with them. And they're like, fine. So 4 months later, they sued, which is fine. And I think we're in a better position being the defendant than the plaintiff in the case. And so, you know, I think it worked out for us to be quiet and let them make the next move. And I think it puts us in a better position. So I'm not sure that a lot of attorneys have that kind of mentality. And like I said, again, I'm very lucky to be in a position to tell my clients, let's not do anything. I can't bill you for doing nothing, but let's not do anything because it's the best thing for you.
Yeah, I think so many real estate investors are the same way, that they're most frenetic with energy, which can be great, but there's time for patience and time for kind of reading the play and reacting rather than forcing the action. And so your case sounds like a classic case. And I often find that doing nothing is the best solution, because then the card gets turned over. Now you know how the game's supposed to be played. You didn't know that until a certain card was turned over. So I think that makes a lot of sense. So just real quick housekeeping. Let's go back and make sure everybody's aware. This is the official podcast for the LA Real Estate Investors Association, and I'm Bill Gross. And this is Lloyd Siegel's program. The website's LAREIC.com, LA County Real Estate Investors Association. We meet for every second Thursday of the month. It's free in the Palms area at the Iman Center. Get the details at LAREIC.com. And you can see upcoming events. There's a boot camp training given about every couple months. The Vendors Expo is the program we do that's free. We get about 50 vendors on one of them. And then we got 250 people for a program. And upcoming in February is going to be on short-term rentals and 2 practitioners. And one of the things I find I like about this program is the people coming to speak are actual practitioners, not just people who want to be in the business. And so that makes it a little different, I think, from my experience. Jack LaPedis is our guest today. He is an attorney located here in Southern California in the Valley area, and need assistance solving a legal matter. Jack's your guy. And the thing I like about him is he has a very clear sense of what he does do, but the things he doesn't do, He has a great network of attorneys they can refer you to. So LaPedis Law, LAPEDIS Law.com, and you can hit the contact button and get those details there. Jack's been a friend of our program since before we launched actually. And again, he's such a good friend, despite the fact he's a UCLA Bruin fan. He and I are still friends and business associates. So let me ask you, as a business person, you deal with real estate investors. You have clients who invest in real estate. It seems like there's reports of stormy weather ahead over this next year. Interest rates up, interest rates down, economy up, economy down, politics. Sounds like we could be anywhere from everything's fine to a civil war. Kind of what are your thoughts about preparing for the next year or two as a business person? And if you had clients asking you from a business point of view, is it a good time to invest or a bad time to invest? How would you answer that question?
I think that what we've learned through history is that, generally speaking, as long as you're not going crazy, real estate is always a good investment. The best time to buy a piece of property was 20 years ago. The second best time is today. And I think that holds true. I think, right now, interest rates are higher than we were used to a few years ago. And of course, a few years ago was super crazy, unprecedented. But what is it that you marry your sales price, but you date your interest rate or something? Isn't it?
Marry the house and date the
like
mortgage.
Right, something like that. So there's the argument that if you're going to buy a house, and the interest rate will do what the interest rate will do, and if it goes down, you'll refinance, and if not. So you can't be wishful about something you can't control, like interest rates. Right. There's other factors, of course. There's inventory. I just saw a thing that said that over 90% of current homeowners have an interest rate under 6%.
Correct.
And there was something like 30% was under 4 or under 3. Some ridiculous thing. And they're actually lower than it was, a year ago, because people have bought at higher interest rates. But it's like, find the house you like, right, get the best interest rate you can, and do what you're going to do. If you're going to buy and hold, it doesn't matter. Right. If you're going to, because the interest rate will change, and then you'll be, if you're doing a 90-day fix and flip or whatever, pencil it out, and if the numbers work, do it.
Right.
But I don't think you can, you can't look at the stock market or interest rates or whatever and say, well, I'm going to try and predict it, or I'm going to try and hit it at the low, when you never know what the low is going to be, and you never know what the high is going to be. So I have found that my clients, when they're talking about these things, which they really do, because it's not really the kind of clients I talk to, but when I'm at these meetings and it's like, look, either do it or don't. Like, stop angsting about it, and just, if you're going to get into the business, get into the business. If you're not, then go find something else to do. Real estate investing is not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Well, I don't think any investing really is for the faint of heart. If I think that if you, just take your money and put it in a bank account, that's for the faint of heart. You're just going to probably suffer versus inflation over the long run. And so, if you're working hard and you have assets to invest, you want to put them to work. You got to strengthen your heart. It's like anything else. You got to work at it and learn and grow. And that's why we have the programs we do to teach people and get them comfortable with it. But at the same time, we want them to know that if they get into trouble, there's resources, there's legal resources, there's something they can call and ask questions to, and before they get too far involved. And that's what we're talking about today. Jack, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. I appreciate, on behalf of all the investors that come to the Wednesday event at the Sizzler and the monthly event at Lloyd Siegel's program, on behalf of them, I appreciate your involvement, support. Thank you for taking time to speak to us today. Again, anybody interested in more of Jack, LaPedisLaw.com, LAPEDIS law.com, and there has a whole background of what he does, how to contact him. And Jack, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.